everyone. Hi. Hi, Lola. You're officially on Facebook Live now because I said your name. Everyone, Lola is here. And if you didn't make it in person, you're going to regret it because now you're Lola here. Does anyone, if you're not sure if the seat is taken, just ask, because it could be that someone's purse is on it, but really no one's sitting there. So that way I can figure out if we need to bring more seats. And we are going to begin. Welcome everyone to MJE Monday nights. I just want to let you know that MJE is also here every Shabbat because we are a community, so definitely come on Friday night and Shabbat morning. It's very social, there's a lot of food, and there's a lot of awesome people as you look around and you see there's even more. So welcome. Coming up next week, how do you win someone's heart with a love poem? You can find out the answer to that next week with an award-winning poet, Yehoshua Josh November, who will read from his 2 books and answer questions from Danielle Geary of the Jerusalem Post. November was recently featured in the New York Times. He was a finalist for the Los Angeles Times Book Prize for Poetry and was a finalist for the National Jewish Book Award. His works, God's Optimism and Two Worlds Exist, have drawn rave reviews. As an added bonus, there will be a guest reading by his brother, whose works have been featured in the Jewish Journal on the foreword. And if that wasn't enough, everyone who comes is eligible for a poetry contest with a chance to win $150. So we've never done this before. We've never had an award-winning poet, and we've never had a poetry contest. So I'm very excited for next week. And in 2 weeks' time, we have a mock Seder. And you are invited to have a seat at our table for MJE's mock Seder with Rabbi Mark Wildes and find out the meaning behind all the rituals and the symbolism of the Seder. There's so many. Why do we dip? Why do we lean with pillows? Why do we open the door for Elijah the prophet? Why do we drink 4 cups of wine? So find out the answers to all this and leave with tangible ideas to share with your family for your Seder. It's not an MJE night if something doesn't. And this week, this Thursday night, does anyone know what's happening this Thursday night at the Jewish Museum of Heritage downtown at Battery Park? Cheer us, Austin.
I believe it's your annual dinner.
Our annual dinner. It's going to be unbelievable. We're having top shelf open bar. We're having Prosecco bar. It's going to be sort of like a wedding, except without all the dancing. Just the joy. And it's really, if you have benefited from MJE, and I believe if you're in this room, then you have, and if you're watching, then hopefully MJE has touched you. And it's really a chance to be a member of our community and show your support. It's really the only time that we really ask people to give back and to support the great works that we do. We just want to bring people closer. We want to give you a Jewish experience. And it's going to be a beautiful, amazing, lovely evening overlooking Battery Park. So please join us on Thursday night. Definitely go online to sign up. You're going to be sad if you miss out. It's going to be amazing. And with that, I'm going to call upon our founder and director, Rabbi Mark Wildes.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Atara. And
so, before you begin, I guaranteed on Facebook that you're giving out free green cards.
So actually, I want to begin by thanking Steve for bringing potential clients to my family's law firm every Monday night at 7 o'clock. For his amazing classes, give it up for Steve Eisenberg, everybody. We have the honor of teaching back-to-back every Monday night, and tonight I have a very, very special honor to introduce my own brother. I want to begin by recognizing the presence of our father, Mr. Leon Wildes, who, give a clap, who's really responsible, of course, for both Michael and myself, our actual existence, and also the incredible work that my brother is doing is really, as you'll hear, just following the legacy of my father, who has been practicing law for over 50 years, one of the leading immigration attorneys in this country. If you haven't had the chance yet of getting my dad's book, we've been speaking about it here a lot. My father just took him 41 years to write his memoirs, his book specifically about his successful representation of John Lennon and that immigration situation in the early 70s. It's an amazing book, and it's an honor to have you here with us tonight, Dad. I just want to recognize Jill as well, and my son, Ezra, who's here. It's a Wildes affair. I haven't actually really ever done this, to officially and formally introduce my brother, who I've really looked up to my whole life. My brother's been a great hero of mine. We fought a lot, and maybe we'll talk about that during the interview. I usually lost, and maybe there's a chance for me to get back at him this evening. But my brother's the managing partner with the leading immigration law firm of Wildes and Weinberg. My dad established many years ago. He serves as a counsel to hospitality groups, international corporate law firms, hotel chains. He took over the course that my father taught for 33 years at Cardozo Law School, where I had the honor of being my dad's student. My brother was also a student. My sister-in-law was also his student. I actually did the worst of all three of us in the class. I'm not holding it against anybody. I'm just kidding. My brother's an adjunct professor at Cardozo and teaches business immigration law. He's a former federal prosecutor. Used to work at the United States Attorney's Office in Brooklyn from 1989 to 1993. And having represented the United States government in immigration proceedings, Michael is now a frequent participant on many panels, and he's a commentator on television networks. I'm sure you've seen him. I just got an email today of his appearances just in the last week, numerous times on MSNBC, on CNN, on Fox News. He has testified on Capitol Hill in connection with anti-terrorism legislation. He's internationally renowned for his successful representation of distinguished individuals and corporate clients. He represents many performing artists, directors, writers, models, actresses, athletes. It goes on and on and on. And as I mentioned, he is continuing the legacy of my dad, who established this practice of U.S. immigration and nationality law in 1960. And his best known accomplishment, as I mentioned, was John Lennon in those deportation proceedings. My dad actually beat the Nixon administration and was able to keep John Lennon and Yoko Ono here in the United States. And more than 50 years later, that same law firm continues to serve distinguished domestic and international clientele. And one of my brother's clients right now, besides, here are a couple of fun names, Lionel Richie, Boy George, Pele, any soccer fans here. My brother was also the mayor of Englewood, where he also connected with some of these individuals, but he's now actually representing Mrs. Trump, the First Lady of the United States, and has a lot of important things to say about the new administration, the refugee ban that we're going to talk about tonight. He's really an authority on this, and it gives me great, great pleasure to be able to introduce my brother, Michael Wildes.
Isn't he so cute?
One thing I forgot to say.
He's so damn skinny, isn't he? The podium in front of him.
So one thing I forgot to mention, which is probably the most important of all, okay?
Yeah.
Is my brother is a Torah-observant Jew, and a very proud one. He wears his yarmulke proudly. When he was an auxiliary police officer for 10 years in Forest Hills, Queens, he wore the yarmulke on the beat. And this is something which, of course, informs him in what he does, and maybe we'll get into that as well. That's okay. So let's begin with the most important question.
But before you do,
Yeah.
thank you, Dad, for what you and mom did before we had any say in anything. And it's really an extraordinary salute, a privilege for me to speak in your presence. To Steve Eisenberg, thank you for what you do for everybody with an accent within this building. And for those of you that are here to talk about your case, I'll make time this evening.
I won't be
to spend
deported,
a few
am I?
times. No, not yet. And to you, Mark, how much admiration I have, my wife Amy, for not only Jill and Ezra and everybody who are here to support you, but for what you've done for the imprint of Judaism on the Upper West Side in the United States. This gorgeous experiment in democracy, and we're here today to talk a main ingredient of it, is moved forward by having events and dialogue. I just should say for the outset that I'm not speaking on behalf of the President or Mrs. Trump, and despite the relationship that I have with them, I'm here today as a Jew, as your brother, and as a Democrat, I suppose.
Excellent. All right, so let's start with the most important question. Why did you beat me up so much in high school?
First, you had it coming. Second, it was such an easy target. My parents would have a nap on Shabbos. All of a sudden there would be a thud, a cry, a bruise, a muffled sound, and then they'd fall asleep again. But I don't know, one of those prerogatives. We are on a camera though, so I'll tell it to you another time. Thank you. Oops, sorry.
Okay. We're going to begin. Give us a little background on the immigration ban, and if you can tell us the difference, because many of us, including myself, are a little confused. What was the initial executive order by the President, and then the revised travel ban, which I think was in effect as of March 16th? Just give us a little background.
Well, first, the President, when he was President-elect, and when he was trying to campaign, was trying to keep hold on a promise that there was lack of vetting from certain nations. President Obama, before President Trump, had delineated countries where there was effectively no vetting, and we've seen this firsthand, where you cannot get documents, birth certificates, marriage certificates. There are no official notaries or areas in many countries, not just the 6 or 7 that were in question. The first ban, the President came forward effectively banning nationals from the affected countries. It was Syria, Iran, Iraq, Yemen, Somalia, Sudan, and Libya. By its terms, it applied to all visa holders, green card holders, and dual nationals. Any Sephardic Jew who was born in Iran, who was a citizen of Canada, who was a U.S. citizen or a dual national, was then prohibited from coming to the United States. There were 200 and something people in controversy over U.S. and international waters when the ban went out, and it was not rolled out as professionally as the President may have envisioned. The new ban, which is less of a ban and more of a visa ban, if you would, dropped Iraq from the affected countries. There are scores of translators and goodwill individuals and defectors that we've represented for years that had stuck their neck out, and it was a mistake in my opinion. They provided for specific exclusions, exemptions, and were very careful to give delineated reasons and protocols, and they were going to have it roll out after Homeland Security could explain it. They delayed the implementation, again giving reasons. On refugees, the first ban suspended the refugee program altogether for 120 days. In my opinion, that was a terrible travesty. We fought pirates in the 1700s. We never stopped taking people to our shores. Our fear of ISIS, Al-Qaeda should never stop us being the world's moral compass. They dropped the total number of refugees from 100,000 per year set by the President to 50,000. They gave preference to religious minorities, and then they barred Syrian refugees altogether. The new refugee policy only has 120 days, and it's dropping it to 50,000 refugees. So the business of taking refugees should continue. This was the rollout, this was the theater, this was a president that had gone publicly saying that he was going to create a Muslim ban and then retreated from his words, who then effectively said that I need to make sure there's a better vetting system, and right now you have the Constitution of the United States, and you have a president, a court, and a theater now that is arguing what's the best interest for our nation.
So in your opinion then, I mean, the Constitution doesn't prevent us from enacting security measures,
Right.
but do you think this is unconstitutional still?
Congress, as I learned from my professor, has the plenary power to make its rules, and it's a shared authority with the President. The President has the responsibility, not just the legal authority, to protect us, to keep America safe, to make it great again if there are issues, and to improve our intelligence, our military, and our vetting at borders. The Constitution in 1965 and the Immigration Act realigned itself, where the President was then prevented from creating quotas or any promulgations that would actually be violative of individuals on national origin. Now, imagine we have a big water around the United States protecting us from those that would want to cause us harm, and that the United States Constitution does not really apply until you hit our shores. So when I go to London, because there's a client that has an appearance for a green card at the American Embassy, somebody hires me to stand outside and hold their dog on a leash because I don't have the right to counsel. American embassies do not let New York lawyers into the embassy because the Constitution doesn't apply, because our sovereignty has decided, our Congress and our President, that it begins at our shores. So, the real question here is, who's right? The President, who wants to protect us and realizes that there's a hole in the system, or our courts, and those who would disagree with the way the President has implemented this? Do the courts then have the right, under questions of law, to stop the President from doing this? And this is where you have right now, in two different courts, in two different circuits, where there's a lot of litigation, and then ultimately this will go to the Supreme Court. And there's a Supreme Court nominee that was interviewed today in Washington, and the drama continues. Will this President step into this? Will he step back? And ultimately, where is the law? And truthfully, for this venue, what is the right thing? The Chumash, the Torah, talks about loving the stranger. Jews, historically, are people of the passport. There isn't a person that we haven't seen in the course of the years that Dad's been practicing, and me, for 52 years I've been on this world. We've been paying rent at 53rd and Madison for 52 years. There isn't a person that isn't being affected by this dialogue, this ping pong that's now going out. What is the position that we, as Americans, as Jews, as people that are concerned of the law, of the book, and for people that are in harm's way?
So let me ask you a more specific question. Some of you might have heard of Rasmia Youssef Odeh, who's a convicted Palestinian terrorist, who spent 10 days in prison, was able to participate on March 8th in the International Women's Day. He fabricated claims regarding his criminal past, and he somehow still managed to become a United States citizen in 2004. How is Homeland Security, in your opinion, you've spent some time on the other side working for the government, how is Homeland Security flawed, and will this ban be able to vet and do a better job keeping the bad guys out?
We're smarter now. This would never happen now. There are efforts to actually have this person, and they're waiting deportation. They are denaturalizing, taking the passport, and they will FedEx the person outside of the United States. I testified in 1999 in support of anti-terrorism legislation, stating to members of Congress that there were students, clerics, diplomats, people on U.S. soil that had no sense of how they got there, but were able to navigate waters in ways our founding fathers never contemplated. No way should a person coming to our shores who would want to cause us harm be able to effectively commit a fraud, become a citizen. And our job every day, believe it or not, is to help discern mistakes of law, mistakes of facts. Today, I had two people in who had lied on green card cases, one purposefully, the other one by accident, and they were applying for citizenship. Everybody now with a visa is applying for a green card. Everybody with a green card is applying for citizenship. People who don't have status or have criminality are worried because of the new dragnet that's being put forward throughout the United States. It's a very dangerous time. But I believe if you rewind or you pull the lens back on the landscape, it actually began in 1979 when our hostages were taken. Our vulnerability, our position of delicacy began in 1979. And we have to, I think if I had to coin the way that I would handle this, is that we have to be more proactive. We can't be reactive. We represented a gentleman who subdued the shoe bomber. Remember Richard Reed? He was on a plane, he was igniting his shoes. There was a 6'7" African-American student who was on a student visa who was dead asleep. I was a mayor in New Jersey, and eventually when I met this guy, and I was brought out to talk about his case on MSNBC, and I said there's a principle called Hakara Tatov. And I said this without a kippah on, and I said it's being gracious to those that have done extraordinary things. I can think of no other person than this gentleman who saved 197 lives and millions of dollars. He was in a dead sleep. Pardon?
African-American.
He wasn't American, he was black.
African.
He was African. So he's African Caribbean. Quite honestly, he was in a dead sleep. He subdued the guy holding two hands away from his ankles while two F-14s took the plane back to Logan. He came off the plane, he was a hero until Richard Reed pled guilty. And then he found himself in harm's way with immigration, and everybody turned their back on him. I thought that was inappropriate. I met with Mrs. Clinton at the time, and we came up with a provocative argument to get him humanitarian parole. He had done something that I think is in the greatest spirit of humanitarianism, and I brought him to meet all the kids in the public high school. Forget the rappers, I wanted them to meet somebody who was in a dead sleep, who woke up and saved lives. This was a hero. Well, after the shoe bomber, there was the underwear bomber, and there was all the kinds of controls and the mishigas, for want of any other word, that we have to go through at airports. We seem to be putting out fires. We're not like the state of Israel, that has a young, vigilant customs force, where you can go to an airport, but you can never see an airplane on the tarmac, where the security starts on the sidewalk, where El Al terminals and all kinds of accessibility and responses that we have seem to be knee-jerk reactions rather than thoughtful efforts. So if I have to answer your question in a longer way, I would just say we need to have a seamlessness when it comes to Homeland Security. A local sheriff should know the foreign students and the hazardous materials, that if a person comes as the 19 hijackers to learn how to fly planes but not land planes, as a trigger between our state and local and federal and immigration enforcement to take these efforts, to get ahead of them, and to responsibly put them out. Hence such an allegiance, such a dedication. And I believe the president not to be a bigot. I believe him to be a man who really wants to improve our system. It's just everything that he said leading up to the campaign does not speak presidential, because it could be Jews. And as I learned in my class, the Harisiadis versus Shaughnessy case, and the hallmark cases that are there, yes, Congress could, if they wanted to, deport or exclude every red-headed Jew that they want to based on the extraordinary authority they have. And the courts, until recently, decided we're not going to touch immigration as it's a matter of political question or national security, and it's really for Congress and the president. But if you see what's unfolding now in the cases, it's magnificent for immigration lawyers and for foreign nationals. The state of Hawaii is talking about a mother-in-law that can't come and the deprivation that the son-in-law is going to have. Halavai, my mother-in-law, should ever hear or see me go to court to make sure that she had a comfortable flight. That they're looking to see how foreign students, lecturers, faculty will be impaling their schools, or that families that cannot marry and tourism will be adversely affected. The narrative of immigration has now affected everybody in this nation. So we've graduated now where there are hallmark arguments. In the 1930s and 40s, presidents were given the privilege of expanding their authority as we fought Nazis. In the 1960s, as civil liberties and rights for individuals came forward, we wanted to make sure our president and Congress would not discriminate based on national origin and the rights of the individual. Here's where we are at loggerheads, and it's so important that we get this right. 25 years after President Reagan, or 30 years, had already affected our immigration laws. Now the dialogue of human rights and security are on the front table of America as we watch what's happening. How do we step up? What's the right example? The only ban that we've seen in the Torah was when Paro decided that all the firstborns were going to be going into the Nile. Presidents, biblically and historically, have had the privilege of choosing what's in our best interest. The question is, what is in our best interest? And again, are we going to allow pirates or terrorists to change the way we respond internationally? I think not.
Thank you. So let me ask you, let me just follow up, if it's okay, based on what you just said, Jewishly now, because there's a tension here, clearly. There's a tension between the president and the courts. There's a tension also, I would suggest, even within Jewish tradition, as to how to deal with this situation. On one hand, the Torah tells us, tzedek, tzedek, tirdov, that we're supposed to pursue justice, which our sages teach is not only for Jews. The Torah tells us, v'ahavta tager, we're supposed to love the stranger. That's referring specifically to converts to Judaism, but the spirit of that idea of hachnasat orchim, of opening up our homes. I mean, should Jews be pushing, in your opinion, the president to relax this? The Torah also, I'm just making this more complicated, the Torah also believes in self-defense. We're not supposed to put ourselves in harm's way. So, in my opinion, it's not clear from the Torah perspective what we should be doing. And, should we be encouraging the president to accept more Syrian refugees like the Germans have? Is this something we should be embarrassed of, that we're only taking a certain amount, or should we be looking upon the Germans as though they're foolish? They're doing something which is detrimental to themselves. How do you think, as a religious Jew, we, and maybe not, if it's okay, not as an immigration lawyer, but we, the rest of us here, what should we be doing other than putting on CNN and Fox and watching them battle it out?
It was an interesting experience for me personally. On Shabbat, I had walked to CNN, to MSNBC. I told them I couldn't have earphones and microphones and that I would be happy to do it. One of them canceled me 5 o'clock in the morning, and I didn't find out until I showed up. And I came back at 9, and then they kind of found me, and I went back and forth. And there was a Reform and conservative rabbi that left word on my cell phone that I spoke, and I did a good Kiddush Hashem, that I spoke well as a Jew. Because I said publicly that, look, I'm an American, I'm an observant Jew. We have to get this right. We need to have smart but fair policies. The Torah tells us to live within the confines of the halacha, not to die by them. And it would be foolish for us to allow people into the United States that would want to cause us harm. But it's also foolish for us to believe in the last 3 or 4 weeks that the president didn't have a chance already to do the vetting. He could have done it already. And that everybody since Travel Ban 1 to Travel 2.0 is now okay to use the old visa. So the real issue here is that the campaign has deteriorated to a point where we don't have that moral compass. Our father spoke at our Zedi, our grandfather's funeral, how his father was a little compass that was facing the entire family, the tonnage of the legacy of his Shem Tov, of his good name in a stated direction. Anything that is good about this nation, anything that is good about innovation, anything that's good about entrepreneurs and risk takers is good about immigration. We cannot forget that. We are shooting ourselves in the foot if we take foreign students and we don't onboard them into the workforce. You go through this kind of schizophrenic motion where you're running ads or you're posting things to make sure an American gets the job, but then you're giving a prevailing wage to a foreign national to make sure that they won't be hurt. We have to be smart. We have to be fair. That's what the Torah would want of our Christian brothers. That's what they would want of us. And we, as an example to the nations, cannot be silent, and we must lead by example. It was the Erev Yom Kippur of this past year when I was with Mrs. Trump at the time, and she had asked me questions about my family and how observant I was and if I would be available at certain hours. And I explained that if I didn't leave, I'd have to do another 1 or 2 of these things. But the dignity, the respect that I received, the efforts that she did to make sure that my wife and I could observe Shabbat in Washington when we were invited, and at the same time, the knowledge that I did not agree with her husband. And I went on Lawrence O'Donnell and I said publicly that Mrs. Trump was not being treated properly, and I was a supporter of Mrs. Clinton. So the judgment here, the quality of how we make decisions, we're losing that dialogue. And I think we have to remind ourselves of that sage of Abraham, who, when he had his bris milah at 90 or 100, was running after visitors and strangers who came to visit him. It's a gorgeous experience to be an immigration lawyer. It was a magnificent experience to be this gentleman's son. But now to have the mantle saddled in my hands, and I have 2 of my 4 children in law school, it is finally getting to a point where we have something to say. And you know something? Jews should be leading the dialogue. And we should be respecting our brothers and sisters on both sides of the aisle. Because there is a lot to say, and there is a lot of foolishness in our systems. But don't kid yourself. The Paperwork Reduction Act reduced a 1-page notice of appearance to 4 pages. It's printed on the notice of appearance. When we sign on to cases, we're signing on 4 pages under the Paperwork Reduction Act. Every time they try to fix something, sometimes it goes fakert, it goes backwards. But we're not supposed to sit here. We're supposed to help make sure that we plug the holes, we take out the water, and we go forward. Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, they testify regularly. Top fold of the Wall Street Journal and New York Times, patents, business, entrepreneurs, hotels, picking of blueberries in Georgia. It all moves forward because of the immigrant spirit. Let's not forget that.
Thank you. Wow. One last question, and then if you guys have any questions or anyone in Facebook land that's watching, Tara will take your questions. Do you think, you know that I did, you remember in graduate school I did a lot of work on the U.S. Response to the Holocaust, or the lack thereof. It's a very dark period in American history, as far as I'm concerned. Do you think this ban is in any way comparable to the obstacles that Jews faced in the late 30s and the early 40s to be able to come here during the Shoah?
I do not for a moment believe that this president is an anti-Semite or doesn't realize what he's doing, and that I think he is well-intended. I just want you to know I've had the privilege of representing Trump models for more than a decade. The Miss Universe organization when Mr. Trump owned it, and now to have a relationship with Mrs. Trump and a lot of wonderful people that have travailed that relationship as well. No way will I give an answer to say that this is the beginning of something when I believe that there's more for our people to take stock and to be proud of surrounding the president. That said, the dialogue deteriorated to such a point that some of the worst of our nation came to the top. Some of the people that supported the president for the wrong reasons articulated themselves in such a disrespectful fashion that it almost gave a soapbox to people, and you couldn't get around or out of their way fast enough or proper enough or good enough for anybody. And I have to tell you, frankly, as a Democrat, as a moderate myself, I feel disenfranchised right now from the political scene altogether. Where do you find a home as a Jew? In the right? On the extreme left? Where's the middle? How do you find the middle? I believe you find the middle by defining the middle. I wore a kippah, by the way, when I was with a police uniform, not because of the secular community. I wanted to show Jews that you could be involved in public service and still be an observant Jew. It's so important for us to live within the halacha, the beautiful blend that Yeshiva University stands for between Torah and Madda, to have an excellence in your Torah observance, but at the same time bring value to the secular world. We should be leading the call on both sides of the aisle to make sure that we get a better product. And you can disagree with people that you respect, and I think that it's really an impossibility. President Obama retired. He had months to put a Supreme Court justice, and this Congress can't get their act together. Another principle of Talmudic law is shtika kehodah, the notion that silence is deafening. It's as if you've taken an action. Because of the silence in Washington, President Obama relied on the doctrine that my father evolved in the Lenin case and gave deferred action to 820,000 young people who, but for the grace of God and their parents, came here by no act of their own. And that's in jeopardy right now. Notice our president hasn't touched that yet. Because if over one Shabbos, one weekend, 200 people were in controversy and the airports filled and the newspapers were swelling, then what happens with 820,000 people who have no accent, who pray Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, and are in our military already. We have a Harvard law graduate who's a DACA recipient who took a travel permission, got her back. She's now going to get a green card based on rules. So the silence in Washington has created a vacuum. President Obama, don't kid yourself, deported more people than any other president in our nation's history. And President Trump is allowing, unfortunately, in these actions, some of the worst people to come forward with the worst intentions. And I believe that Homeland Security, that ICE agents, that people who are working in the Justice Department are well intended. They have a huge, monumental task on their hand, and it's not us to take away the biblical straw from building their bricks, but walls will not protect us from 11 million people in our backyards. If ISIS and Al-Qaeda has already rooted itself in its insidiousness in the United States, building a wall is not the solution. And if this president steps up like no other opportunity and like no other gentleman can, and says now that we have a system in place and we're ridding ourselves of the hardened criminals, which nobody in this room should object to, truthfully, what are we going to do with our 11 million brothers and sisters? And I have to tell you, it's heart-wrenching. We have an Iranian doctor who had a green card approved and he couldn't get back into the United States during the first ban. He was in Italy doing surgery to a child. We had a Sudanese doctor who came in doing brain surgery in New York, but he couldn't get to the airport to see his parents, had to pay us to have a lawyer there to make sure his parents, permanent residents, would come back. This is so back to the future. This is so 1980s. We have graduated from this point. America is smarter than what we're seeing on television, and we as Jews have to lead the path, whether you're on the right, the left, and my preference is really, truthfully, to stay right in the middle.
Thank you. Any questions? Yes, in the back, if you can just stand up and speak loudly. If we have a microphone coming to you. Hang on one second. We want to make sure that our friends in Facebook land are able to hear the questions.
Okay, so I flew back into JFK Airport right after the first travel ban from out of the country, and then again right after the court struck it. And what I noticed was, you know how you go up to the global entry machine, but not the global entry machine, the other machine, and you get an X or you go through. So I went through. There were 10 other people on 2 whole international flights that went right through. American citizens, people with green cards, people from all different countries were being held back. I know that you mentioned a few minutes ago that you think that the ICE agents and that the customs and everyone at the airport, there was a disconnect between what happened and how it got articulated to the people at the airport. And what is different? Because it seems different. What's happening, more people are getting stopped, more people who just have last names that make them appear ethnic, whether it's Hispanic or, I mean, we saw yesterday that a former North Carolina sheriff got stopped because of his name. Like, how does that fit?
What's your name?
Stephanie.
Stephanie. So no doubt the first ban was rolled out impetuously and not thoughtfully. U.S. citizens who are dual nationals, we have leaders in our community of industry who were born in Iran, who are Canadians. They couldn't come back to the United States. Worse, they were on planes when this went into effect, and by the time they landed, people were actually sent back home, which was a real dangerous experience, because they're not being sent back home to Canada sometimes if they have a passport from another country. No doubt the government rolled it out improperly. And you want to know something? We have a diminished sense of expectation at airports. Even citizens have to be more patient, have to take your damn shoes off, and you have to go through this whole protocol. And you have people that are less than sophisticated, who are well-intended, going through your personal effects. And you want to know something? We put up with it. And if they're going to target individuals at an airport because of profiling, I believe that they're professional, and there are metrics in place to call them out on it. I've been a lawyer on some real controversial ones. There was a gentleman who was felled in Mumbai. His name was Titlebound. He went to Mumbai to check on the mushrooms to make sure they were kosher. He put his product in his hotel. He went to the yeshiva when those terrorists came, and this is the first time they were able to efficiently hit 2 targets at the same time. And they found him dead with a Gemara in his hand. He went to Daven Mincha. His father had sent him there, and his father came to see me. What was the issue? His wife had come to the United States. He was an American citizen, the gentleman who was felled. And his wife had 7 kids, and an examiner at the border made her cry. He admitted her, but he put it in the passport, no COS, no change of status, no AOS, no adjustment of status, no EOS, and so forth. It was purposeful. Well, that really upset me. All right, she was an Israeli coming on a B1, B2 visa, and she was traveling frequently, and it was a breach of our immigration protocols, but her husband was killed. He was an American citizen, and there are laws on the boats post 9/11. We represented a score of widows and widowers who had lost their loved one at 9/11, and it took a while from shoe bombers and underwear bombers for the government to put a metric in place to help people. But eventually they stood up. That guy was fired, by the way, because he made her cry. So we are better, we are bigger, we have to think. But don't kid yourself. The government has every right to go through your iPhone, has every right to make sure that you're protected, that you're not going to be a risk to somebody else. And, I run with Hatzalah, the ambulance service in the United States. It's the largest volunteer ambulance service in America. And I go on calls all the time. There was once a call in the El Al terminal, and there was an issue that I had to present. I carry a firearm, and at the time I didn't want the gentleman with the SWAT machine gun to see me go see somebody thinking it was a setup if he saw my weapon. So most people would have resisted if they were carrying a weapon to help a stranger. I went right to the officer and I said, I'm carrying a weapon. That guy I have nothing to do with. This is not a setup. His skull was cracked open now. I'm going to help him. But if you see a weapon, please stand down. Now, that's not a normal it's not a normal experience. First, an immigration lawyer with a gun. Second, somebody who was felled. But these officers, these examiners, these Homeland Security officials, they have to make instant judgments, and they're protecting us. The thing that is really extraordinary is the lack of resource. Right now, there are about 300 and something immigration judges. You have 11 million people here unlawfully, and they're rounding people up, and we don't have one extra judge. They're going to send 11 or 12 judges to sanctuary cities so they can speed up the process. We can do better than that. I don't know if I answered your question, but the truth is, leave yourself plenty of time when you go to the interview. Oh, by the way, there was one couple that met in the baggage claim. They were MJE graduates. So for those of you that don't find your intended here, airports are good venues.
David, yeah.
This is a question for both. So I think one of the most troubling things about this debate is that the statistics around U.S. deaths, about 9,000 to 10,000 people a year die by homicides from guns, not just including suicides. And the number of people that die here from terror attacks is a fraction of that. And I've kind of personally come to the conclusion that people are more fearful of terror attacks because it is death by enemy. When someone swears to ISIS or Allah, that evokes more of a visceral, fearful reaction as opposed to the thousands of random gun deaths. And I'm wondering, in both the Constitution and Jewish laws, is there something that justifies this reaction to death by an enemy as opposed to death by a fellow citizen?
Well, self-defense.
Okay. Should I take the Constitution or the Torah?
Take the Torah.
So the Torah really it does speak about if somebody comes, haba laharcha, the Torah says if somebody comes to attack you, then you have to, as my brother mentioned before, preempt. You have to do everything you can to not only protect yourself, but even third parties. It's the law of Rodev. If you have a friend who's being pursued by someone else with the intent to kill, it's your responsibility to protect your fellow, even if it means applying lethal force. The Torah does not distinguish why. If it's an unjustified killing, then it doesn't matter whether it's an American homegrown criminal who's just robbing a bank and wants to get away with it, or it's a terrorist from an Islamic country. It doesn't matter. The Torah demands that we protect ourselves, and this is important. This is not something that we poo-poo. The reason I think that the IDF refers to itself to this day as the tzva Haganah Yisrael. It is the Israeli Defense Forces, because it is a mitzvah to defend yourself. There is no glory in martyrdom in Judaism. And the 2,000 years that we spent in persecution and exile is an aberration. It's not something we should ever get used to. The state of Israel is the greatest Kiddush Hashem, sanctification of God's name in the world today, because it protects Jews. It doesn't matter why. There are so many crazies and so many different types of people that have tried to attack us for every possible contradictory reason. A Haman wants us dead because we're not loyal citizens. The Nazis want us taken out of the picture because we're too integrated in German society. It doesn't matter. Islamic terrorism, self-defense is very, very important. That's why when I asked my brother this question, it's not so simple. You should just let everybody in and let the president, just oppose the president. We have to vet. That's an important thing. There's another prohibition in the Torah, al tamad al dam recha, do not stand by idly. And doing something which is tantamount to foolishness, to allowing yourself or your families or your country to be put in harm's way, is also a violation of the Torah. And yet the Torah also obligates us to invite the stranger in. But not if he's carrying a sidearm, unless his name is Mark Wildes.
I mean, constitutionally, there's the castle doctrine that I think this. It's the castle doctrine that does not require a person to retreat in their own home. So in most states throughout the nation, if you're in your own home and somebody comes, or in your own car, which is an extension of your home, you're permitted to use deadly force. You don't have to retreat. But the notion and principle is that if you can take another alternative path, you're not allowed to brandish a weapon. If you can retreat from an altercation, you don't want to then justify the use of deadly force where it could have been eliminated in the first place. I don't know why we run so scared. Again, I see these individuals like pirates. I met with a lot of Israeli intelligence and military people. I host generals through a wonderful organization that my brother and I are big supporters. Our soldiers speak with Benjamin Anthony. And they laugh at ISIS. Hezbollah is more of a threat to the state of Israel and the geopolitical issues with Hamas and Al-Qaeda and so forth. The media has given us such a snapshot, has given them such a play. Their interplay with social media has created such an environment. I have a case. Interesting client gave me permission to talk about this. Newsweek has already featured 4 of our stories, one on a cover in the last 6 months. Young man came to the United States. He's got deferred action under the Lenin Doctrine. He's a student that was brought here by his parents. He's walking in Virginia with his girlfriend, and somebody by his apartment, not 2 weeks after he moved there, starts screaming Allah Akbar with a machete and tried to cut his head off. He passed out. He started stabbing the girlfriend. The guy came to, fought him off, and went forward. There's a U visa that allows an individual who's a victim of a crime, who participates in the prosecution of an individual, to then stay in the United States to see justice served. This is the kind of metric that we should be living in. A couple who comes to me, an individual who comes to me destitute, that has no options, but is raising children, that will stand in a court and see justice through, that will save somebody else, is the stock of person that we want in this nation. George Washington spoke of the stock of Abraham, that biblical sense of hospitality, of immigration, of innovation. We want people who will come to and protect somebody, who have that instinct, like Kwame James, the gentleman who subdued the shoe bomber. We cannot hide behind our fears, nor should our elected officials, Republicans, Democrats, or others, play on our fears through media. The xenophobia is counterproductive to the globalization and the internet and all the industries and everything at our footstep. And I go faster to Fox News than I go to any other network, so that I can speak proudly of the way I feel, and I get beat up, but I hold my own. And you want to know something? I respect the people that I debate, and I respect the anchors and the people, because they're not only clients of our office, but they've referred their friends, and they get it too. There's a media narrative that is changing things, and if you keep it to its fundamentals, like my brother said, we know how we're supposed to go, we know what the right thing is. We just have to lead by example.
I'm going to cut in with a question from Facebook Live from Danielle Ziri, who is a journalist of the Jerusalem Post. She says, I think we can agree he is not an anti-Semite, but yet the president seems to be walking a fine line with anti-Semitism, in the sense that he also has a base of white supremacists that he doesn't want to anger. It took him too long to condemn some incidents, for example, or he did so halfway. Isn't this dangerous for the Jews?
Yes. But when you wake up a sleeping giant with a weapon in its hand, you have to be careful, because if you don't put it down fast or properly, it can be embittered and cause more harm before you put it out. I take the president at his word with the family members that he has and the judgment that I've seen. He has sponsored people for visas, and he understands the entrepreneurial skills and talent that foreign nationals have. I don't for the life of me believe for a moment that he's an anti-Semite, and anybody who's bringing that up should just see the way he and his family have stepped up to his daughter majestically and in a beautiful example of respect for diversity. So the Jerusalem Post is concerned, and thank God the media with these lights and cameras are doing the best that they can do. And there are multiple truths and there are shades of gray, and your mettle will be tested. I saw this as a mayor myself. I couldn't drive on Shabbat or Jewish holidays, and yet there was a young African American that was killed when he was running away from police. And I had to go to a church with the respect of my rabbis and permission on Rosh Hashanah, and I stood up there and I said that the police officers put themselves in harm's way by reaching in there. He had swallowed a condom with the cocaine in it. And I said, I'm here as a brother. I'm a Jewish brother of yours. If we have a neighbor and a child can swallow this product thinking that there's no way out to avoid arrest, and our police officers will put themselves and their own hygiene at risk and put a hand in, and that's why he looked like he was so beaten up. They tried to save him from himself. We, you, we have to do better for our brothers, our sisters, and our children. This is a problem for all of us. So I felt, in many ways, by the time I got there, I wasn't there fast enough, I didn't say the right thing, and I needed the facts. And everybody wanted to castigate the police officers, and Al Sharpton was on the way. Until the Jewish lawyers stood on the podium, didn't talk into the microphone on the holiday, and spoke out of love and with respect, and gave them the facts. So I hope our president will step up faster and stronger, and I hope that the people that will stick to him like flypaper will feel no home, but we have to give the gentleman a chance. We owe it to him, he's our president.
Yes.
Can you speak a little bit to the controversy about Melania Trump modeling without a work visa and how she came about finding you?
Maybe you want to ask my wife.
If you can't be in California, you would have seen her. So.
That's right. Well, first, I want you to know she's absolutely lovely and extraordinarily smart and gracious. What happened was I ended up having a relationship with the Trump lawyers and family for many years, as well as the Kushners. You should know that Dad's reputation and the practice has developed extraordinary entrees. We've represented scores of prime ministers, former presidents, family members who've married immigrants through the years. Ike Eisenhower's granddaughter is a client of ours. The former prime minister of Canada, Brian Mulroney's daughter, we did her visa, her green card, and citizenship. So it was never untoward for us to get a phone call that somebody wanted to see you. It could generally be a former prime minister or president or leader. On this occasion, it was the first lady, but at the time, she was the wife of a candidate. And they asked if I would come visit and look at her papers. I met her, and she asked if I would do a press conference, and I wasn't comfortable because I was a Hillary Clinton supporter. And I expressed my discomfort, and they respected that. And I looked at the papers, and I saw that there was no exposure, there was no issue, and I agreed to pen a letter. And from there, the relationship developed. She respected the rule of law. In many ways, I compared her to the Queen Esther of Purim, where she was an immigrant. She had the ear of the president, and she was an immigrant too. This is the second First Lady in our nation's history where she will have been an immigrant, and she will open that narrative for the next years while her husband is president. To her own credit, there's something extraordinarily fine, reserved, articulate, and caring. It's family and friends and business. And with all the schmutz and all the stuff that went on, she never lost a beat. She was always consistent and always a lady. And I think that we'll take stock in the years to come that she is a First Lady of the First Order, and that the president who became president because of his talent actually has a good eye, has good judgment, and has a plan. It may not be seen, it may not be appreciated, and he may be making mistakes. God knows I made a lot of mistakes. Just ask anybody watching this Facebook who didn't agree and didn't vote for me as mayor. You have to give him a chance. And he chose well as his Ezer Kenegdo, as his wife. I'm still very impressed with her.
Yeah, please.
As a Democrat, I first want to... Thank you. My name is Lisa. As a Democrat, I'm really very appreciative of everything you said. I see the Democratic Leadership Council still lives.
That's right. It's still around. Even though Evan Bayh isn't the Senate.
My question is on something you said. It's a political question. It's on something you began your talk with. You mentioned how President Obama had already designated these countries for extra vetting. The argument I've heard that differentiates what President Obama did with what President Trump is trying to do is that it was about vetting people who had gone through Europe, through Germany and other countries. Could you flesh out that argument? What
Yes.
exactly are they saying? And you seem to be saying something differently.
So President Obama had decided through intelligence and support that these countries had issues, and President Trump then used this in concert with his campaign promise to start a vetting system. Mind you, this whole thing would have rendered moot had the Secretary of State just cabled those American embassies and said, hold off on visas for the next 90 days. Would we be here debating this? No. It would have been within the ambit of the Secretary of State, who learned from a prior president that there's a vetting issue, to investigate it. It's purposeful, it's the hachas, because the president came forward with a Muslim ban and then had the audacity to pen the executive order. And if you read the executive order, it has greater constitutional strength, the second one, than the first one. Because there is specific, clear language, and there are provisions of law in the Immigration Act that does give the president the authority to do what he did. But he opened up the dialogue and the conversation with states. And that is really an enfranchisement for us to see that every time the president says no on immigration, he's involving himself in marriages. That if they say no to a lecturer, they're saying no to the First Amendment. And if international commerce is being affected by this, he's stymieing business where he should be using immigration to help it. No doubt the president is disappointed that their cases, particularly the one in Hawaii, had a mere footnote on the issue of national security. But these countries really do need improvement on their vetting. It just doesn't allow us to do it the way it was done, in my opinion. Indonesia, Saudi Arabia, they're worse progenitors of terrorism, and they weren't on the list. Venezuela, for that matter, where anti-terrorism research has shown that monies have come through that country, and there is no vetting either in Venezuela. President Bush, George W. Bush, actually had the NSEERS program that cut across all Arab nations. Males between the age of so-and-so and so-and-so were then going to be vetted and put through a fingerprint and a biometric scan in airports. That was constitutional because it didn't discriminate based on national origin. The problem here is that the president I think, was using the air cover of his predecessor president, but didn't set up and unravel this poorly constructed executive order in the first place. While people were in the airplane. While people were in the airplane. You understand? You don't do that.
What did Obama do? What was it that Obama did?
Obama, the president, had seen that there were areas within these nations where the vetting didn't exist. I want you to know there are other countries in similar majestic flaws. Pakistan. There are provinces in Pakistan where you cannot get documents, and the vetting of an individual cannot be assured. And we have to go for substitute documents. The Foreign Affairs Manual has a protocol that you can put forward as an alternative argument where somebody was born in a household as opposed to a hospital, and the government accepts these documents. Again, the vetting is, in my opinion, a misnomer. We have 11 million people here without the right authority to be here. We've turned our backs on those individuals while we pick on 6 or 7 countries. That's not within the majesty of America.
Just one last question. We have time for just one last question. Yeah, please.
Hi.
Oh, right here. I'm sorry. I apologize. You'll stick around after.
So how do you prevent terrorists from entering beyond a reasonable doubt?
In this society, you can't. And by the way, we have homegrown terrorists. So how do you stop somebody from expressing their politic? I was a prosecutor on civil forfeiture actions, and I would have to litigate against some schmutz, some pornography that came through JFK Airport. I had to go before a federal judge and explain that this was a patently offensive portrayal of sex. It appealed to a prurient interest, while somebody said, this is my cup of tea. This is art. This is the creative. You have a federal judge that can substitute his judgment or her judgment for a president of the United States. The president would argue that that is inappropriate. I would argue that our system was designed to allow for this redundancies. So, you're looking for seamlessness. Like I said, you want state and federal seamlessness in intelligence and law enforcement. You want to know, again, where your foreign student population is. You want to know when people come and leave. If they can find a cow with mad cow's disease and a car with low jack, we should know where somebody's learning how to fly planes and doesn't care about landing. And if there's substance or risk, we need to have a metric in place that will make sure that we do it. All this without asking for people's passports, all this without insisting that a person speak the English language, all this by maintaining the moral compass that we are to the world. What a privilege it is for us to go to a hotel and not have to produce a passport. What a privilege is it to see in the sanctuary of cities, mayors are coming to help those who are living in their shadows. Imagine the alternative now. We handled the case without fee of a Mali cab driver who came home and saw his wife and 4 children were killed in a fire by a bad heater. He came to see us the next day, and I was on the O'Reilly factory with Bill O'Reilly the next night. And I said to him, Bill, he wants to visit, he wants to take his wife and his 4 kids and bury them in Mali. He's a devout Muslim. If he leaves America, he's out of status. He self-deported himself. We have a Judeo-Christian ethic where we allow people to bury their dead. We should allow him to go and come back. What happened in his corridor in the Bronx is a reflection of the deafening silence in Washington. While people are playing Keystone Cops, there are poor living conditions where landlords and tenants have created poor tenancies. We're not going to then put first responders, police, and ambulance and EMTs in harm's way. We're going to have to fix immigration. And you fix immigration, you'll fix issues of hunger, you'll fix issues of globalization, you'll fix issues of all the challenges that we have. But it's actually America's police chiefs and mayors that have come to appreciate the value. How do you get intelligence from a community that is being persecuted? How did we get intelligence as this happens, as we were slaves in Egypt? How did we surmount our challenges? I have to tell you that this experiment that we call America, this beautiful diamond in the rough, is made better by dialogue and discussions like this. This mayor in this city, like him or not, created the greatest hachnasas orchim by giving a card, the very dignity to people that are here without status, to allow them to go to a zoo with their kids for free for a year, to allow them to get a bank account, to have the dignity. We sat with Mayor Koch over a dinner, and I said to him when I was a mayor, Mayor, how did you deal with this? He said, Michael, if they were serious about immigration, they would have had the military and the army, and they would have deported people. If not, it was my job as mayor to make sure every soul was educated in the city confines. On his epitaph, he wanted to be remembered only as a good Jew, a mayor of this city. This beautiful experiment, this snapshot of time that we have, take the Torah that you're learning and lead by example. No greater platform than immigration.
Thank Michael for amazing presentation. This was a lot of fun for me. I just want to thank my dad again for being here and for creating this legacy in our family. There's someone who I didn't mention that I want to end our program with, if that's okay. This Thursday night, Tara mentioned that we're celebrating, we're having our annual dinner. It's the 18th year, it's Chai, which of course is Jewish life. And we began this organization. I was able to start this only because of my dad, my brother, and my entire family. Joe and I were able to begin this because we wanted to maintain the legacy of our mother, Aleha Shalom. I just wanted to say how proud my mother was, how much she loved my brother, how proud she was.
She liked you more than me.
Sometimes.
Yaakov and Esau, right? That's what
Oh, we can beat him up.
It's a baby, it's a baby.
I was upset once in a while when I was, on the bottom, and she'd be like, all right, just fight your own battles, which was a very dangerous thing. See the difference here. But I just really want to thank you, Michael, and I know that Mom is smiling down on us. Very, very proud of the work that you're doing, and how much you've supported me, and how much Dad has continued to maintain this amazing community that we've built together over the last 18 years. It's Chai, Am Yisrael Chai. Jewish people should continue to live, and we as American Jews should continue to hold our heads high and follow my brother's example of being both a proud American, as you can hear, and a very, very proud Jew. I thank you all for being here tonight, and hope you'll all join us on Thursday night. Have a great night. Stick around and see more.